Today I want to talk about a way that you can address a matter with a narcissist who's constantly deviating subjects when you're trying to resolve an issue, how those questions reveal what's underneath the mask, and how to get back into the driver's seat when it comes to their efforts in getting an emotional reaction from you. Lose focus on your issue, get you to fall into defensive explaining. Does that sound familiar? Control the whole narrative and create chaos instead of clarity, because that's what they want. So let's get you back in the driver's seat here. Deanna King here for those who don't know me, and this channel is all talk narcissism and codependency. So welcome, and let's get started. When you are dealing with someone who is narcissistic, especially high narcissistic or NPD, the most exhausting part isn't always what they say. It's what happens inside of you while they're saying it. You can walk into a conversation grounded, clear about what you want to say, and even hopeful because you've weighed out your words and gone over it with a fine-tooth comb about what you're going to say, how you're going to say it. And we often do this around a narcissist, which, by the way, is all part of being in survival mode. But anyway, in this, you're not looking for a fight. You're looking for a resolution. You want to clear the air. You want to get to a point where the both of you understand each other, especially that they understand your point of view, because it's always one-sided. You understand them, they don't understand you. You just want peace. But within seconds or minutes of opening your mouth, it all shifts into a downward spiral. The topic moves into a whole other direction. The focus is now on you and how you're in the wrong about everything. It's not about fixing, it's about accusations. So what began as a simple issue has now turned into a conversation about your tone, your delivery, your memory, your sensitivity, your character. And now you're explaining yourself again. Now you're clarifying what you meant. Now you're defending something that you didn't even come in to defend. We call that word salad, which I'll be doing another video on shortly. When the conversation finally ends, if you can call it that, you feel drained. Not because you yelled, not because you played a part in attacking them, but because somehow you ended up on trial again. And this is where hope keeps you staying in this chaotic relationship. You tell yourself, maybe next time I'll say it better. Maybe they had a point. Maybe if I stay calmer. Maybe if I phrase it differently, maybe if I bring it up at a better time. You believe that there's a version of this conversation that will finally click for them. It won't. That hope, it keeps you invested though. It keeps you explaining. It keeps you defending. But over time, something else happens. You start rehearsing conversations before they happen, like I just mentioned. You start editing yourself mid-sentence. You end up shrinking your concerns because you already know the pushback that's coming. You become strategic instead of authentic and careful instead of honest. That is the cost of staying in defense mode. When you live in defense mode long enough, your nervous system, it stays activated even in calm moments, because you never know when the next shoe is going to drop. You anticipate misunderstandings. You anticipate blame. You know it's going to happen. Yet you anticipate having to prove your intentions. That level of hypervigilance, it's exhausting, and it's constant. It chips away at your confidence. You start second-guessing your memory. You wonder if you're actually too sensitive or too passive-aggressive. But what choice do you have here? Because everything you say becomes ammunition. So you bottle it up all inside. You have no choice. But still, you question whether you're asking for too much. You are not. You're not asking for too much. You're asking for mutual accountability. But when accountability is consistently redirected, you get trained to over-explain. You overcompensate. Your energy isn't focused on connection anymore. It's focused on survival. So instead of trying harder, something has to shift, because eventually you do get to that point. And so you stop trying to win the conversation, and instead You start observing it, and that's where the gold starts coming in. The goal is no longer to convince them. The goal is to see clearly. And that is a massive shift if you can get there. Because when you're trying to convince someone, you are invested in their agreement. When you're observing, you're gathering information. That's the difference. And before we go any further, this only works if you're ready to see what's actually there, not what you hope is there, not what you remember from the good moments. What's there consistently? What are you always experiencing? Let's take a look. Imagine that you calmly bring up something small. They forget to tell you about a change in plans. You say something like, I just wish you would have let me know earlier, and immediately they say that you're overreacting. They bring up something you did 3 months ago, or they question your tone. The focus shifts away from the miscommunication and onto your character. And normally that's where you start defending, right? And explain why it matters. You justify your reaction. You pull examples to prove your point, and the cycle continues. But this time, you take a breath. And instead of defending, you say, for example, can you be specific about what I'm overreacting to? And then notice the shift. You're not attacking. You're not escalating. You're narrowing the lens here. So if they respond with clarity and stay on topic, then there's room for dialogue. But if they get irritated and say something like, you know exactly what I mean, that's information for you. At which point you can calmly follow with, well, what did you mean by overreacting? And if they refuse to clarify, or they mock the question, or they escalate further, that's information also. This is where the 7 questions come in. Not to corner someone, not to outsmart them, but to test capacity and observe patterns. So take the personal out of it and step into observation. So the first question is, can you be specific? Vague accusations create confusion. Specific examples create clarity. If someone cannot tolerate being asked for one clear example, you're learning something about their relationship with accountability. The second question is, what did you mean by that? And this is powerful when there are these subtle digs, sarcasm, or dismissive comments. Healthy communication can withstand clarification. If asking for clarification creates anger, that tells you the comment likely wasn't meant to build understanding. The third question is, what was your intention when you said that? And this invites reflection. In narcissism, they don't do reflection very well, do they? Someone capable of repair can pause and think about their impact. Someone who immediately deflects or counterattacks is showing you resistance to self-examination. The fourth question is, how do you think that landed when they did or said something inappropriate here? Impact matters. So if someone consistently dismisses your emotional experience, you're looking at a lack of empathy, not a misunderstanding. The fifth question is, would that feel fair if that were reversed? And this exposes double standards. Reciprocity is foundational. Irritation at that question tells you a lot. The sixth question is, what would resolving this look like to you? And listen carefully. Does resolution mean mutual understanding, or does it mean you backing down? The answer reveals expectations. And the seventh question is, are we trying to understand each other right now, or are we trying to win? And this one, it brings motive into the open. Sometimes the reaction to that question tells you more than the answer itself. Each question is delivered calmly, quietly, and without accusation, without judgment. You're simply observing, and you're not reacting, which is what they want, right? Each answer, each pause, each deflection tells you something about who they are. Let's add a second example here. Imagine a conversation about responsibilities at home. You ask for help preparing dinner, and they might say fine, but they roll their eyes and they mutter something under their breath about how they're always doing everything. You could react, because most likely they're not always doing everything you are, but You could argue, or you could spiral into defensiveness, but instead you want to pause. Give yourself that space, because the narcissist wants your mind preoccupied all the time with no space to process and get clarity. They confuse you using all kinds of emotional tactics, and so you're constantly in survival mode with no space to think or process and get clear as to what really is going on. That way you can't make decisions. It's how they control you, and that's how they take over your life, or should I say what was your life. So breathe. This is your winning card here. You notice the tone, the body language, the subtle criticism. Ask, what did you mean by that comment? They either clarify, reflect, or deflect. If they do clarify, even partially, you see some capacity. If they deflect, you get clarity on patterns. Then you can follow with, how do you think that landed? So what's visible now, it's their willingness. Do they care that they caused harm? You're no longer measuring empathy here. You're measuring intent. So if someone can recognize impact but repeatedly chooses not to repair it, that's not incapacity. That is priority. You're seeing what matters more to them. Being right, being dominant, maintaining control, protecting ego, or protecting you. And when you can stand back and observe like that, you're no longer looking to change them, because you're now seeing them for who they really are. And that's liberating, because when you can see patterns clearly, you stop negotiating with illusions. You stop replaying conversations in your head. You stop trying to come up with the perfect sentence or approach. You stop hoping that the next conversation is finally going to register. You are grounded in reality. So you see patterns, not wishful thinking. And yes, clarity can feel uncomfortable at first. It's hard to accept that the person that you've helped and been so kind to and that you've loved would be such a monster. But you have to remember that NPD is abnormal. It's pathological. And I'm not talking about someone having some narcissistic traits here. We all have some, and that can be healthy. But when it's crossed over to someone who exploits, who never takes accountability and has no empathy for how they've left you feeling, that's where you're looking at abnormal. That's when you realize that it's who they are, period. Which means that you no longer have to take personally what they say or do. And that's where you can start packing your bags. You realize that you've been negotiating with someone's resistance rather than their willingness. That's grief, and grief is part of the process. You mourn the version of them that you wish that they could be, all normal. That's also the moment that you stop confusing hope with possibilities, though. And this is when power returns, because at this point you're stepping into radical acceptance, and that is everything. Because once you're aware, you act differently. You adjust expectations. You adjust energy, because you're no longer willing to give up your peace so freely anymore. You no longer invest in proving yourself to someone who has shown a pattern of evading accountability. That, my dear, is success. Awareness is everything. Paying attention and observing allows you to hold space for what's possible and what isn't. You can continue the relationship strategically with boundaries, or you can step back, but you're no longer trying to fix someone else's inability to reflect. Your questions have done their work. You've observed. You've documented the response patterns. You've measured empathy, reflection, and consistency. And now your choice is informed. And that is everything. The difference between chaos and calm isn't in controlling someone else. It's in seeing clearly and adjusting accordingly. So be kind to yourself in this. You are learning. You are growing. You are reclaiming your life here. And once you see clearly, you'll respond differently, not reactively. Just aware. And awareness changes everything. And by the way, the last video I did was on reading the body language of the narcissist. So while you're being observant here, watch that video also to show you more places that you can observe. So thank you to those of you who have taken the time to listen today. And If this has given hope or empowered you in some form or other, please consider subscribing, clicking that like button, and maybe leaving a comment. I'm wishing you all a beautiful day. Stay well, stay strong, and we shall see you in the next video. Bye for now.